because today is the Yortzeit. Today is the Yortzeit of the Rambam. It says about the Rambam, Moshe ad Moshe lekam k'Moshe. Beryl One used to always say that when, I shouldn't say he used to always say, I heard him say once that when the Rambam wrote the Sefer Mishnah Torah Rambam, it was such an all-inclusive Sefer. It teaches you anything you need to know about any halach in Yiddishkeit. So he said that after my Sefer, no other Sefer will ever be needed. And he says the Rebbeinu Shalom is an irony that there's no Sefer that prompted the writing of more Sforim than the Rambam.
I don't think he minds, by the way.
Neither the Rebbeinu Shalom nor the Rambam. Okay, let's see the Heilige Gemara. The Heilige Gemara says as follows. Now, yesterday we did the calculations, and I wasn't perfectly clear, so I just want to review the chronology of the events. Nebuchadnezzar became a king, and the first year that he was a king, he stayed away from Eretz Yisrael. He conquered Nineveh. Then the second year that he was in business, he conquered Yerushalayim, which means he took over the Malchus of Yehoyakim. Yehoyakim was not such a big tzaddik, and he accepted upon himself the rulership or the monarchy of Nebuchadnezzar, and for 3 years he was like a puppet regime. After the third year, he decided, I don't like this anymore, and he started rebelling against Nebuchadnezzar. And for 3 years, he was fighting and resisting Nebuchadnezzar. And after those last set of 3 years, which is now 6 years into the time period that Nebuchadnezzar took over, he killed Yehoyakim. Who did he put in instead of Yehoyakim? Yehoyakim's own son, Yehoyachin. He said, I just told him, Nebuchadnezzar, are you crazy? If the father was against you, what exactly makes you think you're going to get any type of loyalty out of the son? So after Yehoiakim's first year, he was deposed, he was killed. I'm not sure if he was killed or if he was sent to the Gauls. He was sent to the Gauls. He was sent to Bavel. He was packaged and sent to Bavel. They UPS'd him to Bavel, and then they put him instead of him Tzidkiyahu. Tzidkiyahu was king for 11 years, and 11 years after he became king was Churban Beis Hamikdash, and then Tzidkiyahu was packed up and sent into Golus Bavel as well. So we have a brisa where we have the Gemara tells us that there was Golus of 7 years and there was Golus of 8 years. It's a cryptical saying. So the Gemara tells us that the Golus of 7 years is the Golus of Yehoyachin that occurred 7 years after Nebuchadnezzar took over Yerushalayim, because there was the 6 years when he was dealing with Yehoyakim and the 1 year that he dealt with Yehoyachin. So that means 7 years after Nebuchadnezzar took over Yerushalayim, Yehoyachin went into Golus. And that also is 8 years after Nebuchadnezzar became king, because the first year that he was king, he didn't touch Yerushalayim, he stuck in Nineveh. Then there's another cryptic message that says in year 18 or year 19 was the Golus. So the Gemara tells us that that's not referring to the Golus of Yehoyachin, that's referring to the Golus of Tzidkiyahu, which was 11 years later. And it refers to the same year. It was either 18 years from the time that Nebuchadnezzar took over Yerushalayim, or it was 19 years from the time that Nebuchadnezzar took over as a king, and he took over Nineveh. Now let's figure out how long Nebuchadnezzar was a king for. So a pasuk later tells us that after Yehoyachin was in Golus for 37 years, the new king who took over for Nebuchadnezzar, whose name was Abel Merodach, he took over and he took Yehoyachin out of jail in Bavel. But with that pasuk, we can now figure out how long Nebuchadnezzar was a king for, because he was a king for 37 years after Yehoyachin was put into Golus, but he was also king for 8 years before Yehoyachin was put into Golus, because the calculation before was his first year he took over Nineveh, his second year he took over Yerushalayim, and he dealt with Yehoyakim for 6 years, and Yehoyachin for 1 year. So that means by the time Yehoyachin went into Golus, Nebuchadnezzar was already a king for 8 years. He was king for an additional 37 years. So 37 plus 8 is 45 years. So by the time Yehoyachin was taken out of Galus, Nebuchadnezzar was 45 years a king. And that means Bavel, the dynasty of Bavel, was 45 years old at that time. Belshazzar thought that when the dynasty of Bavel will be 70 years, that's when the Geula will come. And if that point in time passes and the Geula doesn't come, then it was all a farce. So when the Evel Merodach took over, the Malchus of Bavel, the dynasty of Bavel, was already 45 years old. Evel Merodach, the Gemara tells us, without a Makar, it says Gemara, the Gemara tells us that Evel Merodach was the king for 23 years. So now we have 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar. We have 23 years of Evel Merodach. We're at 68 years. We're up on the threshold. We're already on the threshold of arriving. We're on the threshold of arriving at 70. Then Belshazzar took over. Belshazzar took over from Evel Merodach. He waited 2 years. Now it's year 70. In his third year, when he sees that 70 years passed since Bavel, the dynasty of Bavel started, which he misunderstood Yirmiyahu's Nebuah as saying that the dynasty of Bavel, when it's 70 years old, that's when it will collapse. And he decided to bring out the Kalim, and that messed him up. He got killed because of it. Kumt Arayin Achashverosh, the Große Chacham, and he said, Shkoyach, Belshazzar was an idiot. I'm a smart guy. He made a mistake because Yirmiyahu never said that it's the dynasty of Bavel that starts the timing of the 70 years. It's Bavel that starts the timing of the 70 years. What does Bavel mean? Bavel means Golos Bavel. So I'm going to consider that Golos Bavel started when Yehoiachin was sent into Golos. So that means there's 8 years missing. So all I have to do is add 8 years to the cheshbon of Belshazzar, and then I have the secret of the 70 years. So let's see what he did. There was a year that Belshazzar was in business after the story with the Kalim and the Beis HaMikdash. After Belshazzar was king, who took over? The pasuk tells us that Daryavish and Koresh took over, and between the two of them, there was 5 years. So now we're already at 6 years, and now Achashverosh took over. And Achashverosh took over. He said, all I have to do is wait 2 years, and then I'm in business. And that's where there's 70. And that explains the beginning of the Gemara, where it says, Kisheves HaMelech Achashverosh, he made a party, and it was a 3rd year. Kisheves would be his 1st year. Why would he wait until his 3rd year to make this big party? Because it wasn't until his 3rd year that, according to his timing, his 70 years of Golos Bavel have timed out. So Kivin de Chazu, the Moli Shivin, V'lo Yifrik, when his 70, starting from the point where Yehoiachin was sent to Bavel, and he doesn't see any action on the scene of Klal Yisrael coming back into power. Omar Hashta Vaday Suloi Mifriki. That's it. The whole Nevuah is a farce. Apa Kamoni de Mikdasha Vishtamish Behu. He started the party hardy. Basatan Varikad Benaim Varakas Vashti. And we discussed yesterday why Vashti, Belshazzar himself got killed. So why did Achashverosh get a pass with Vashti getting killed? And Shmuel told us that he read in the article from the Ben Yehoyada that Vashti was Achashverosh's link to royalty, as well as Belshazzar. It was the one who was mechanech that you could use the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore Belshazzar also deserves to be punished, even for Achashverosh using multi-level marketing. Belshazzar also had ownership in Achashverosh's rebellion against the Rebbeinu Shalom. So Vashti was a perfect carbon to punish both Achashverosh as well as Belshazzar. Vashti had something in common with Haman's daughter. They were both an only daughter, and they both were children of despicable people, right? So that takes care of Vashti. There's another svara that's brought down why Vashti was killed in Achashverosh, and that is because once Belshazzar already defiled the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash, they lose their kedusha. Now it's no longer being moil behektish. Now it's just very disrespectful. So that's why it was less of an chomer. It was less chomer. That's what Tamar Shalom said. Once a goy defiles hektish, it loses its kedusha. Yeah, we learned that as well by the stones of the Beis Hamikdash, of the Mizbeach as well, that they piled up in one of the rooms. So, Frank the Gemara, Shaper Choshev, Achashverosh's calculation was pretty good. It was 70 years from when Yochanan was put into Golos bubble. So why was he mistaken? He also made a mistake. You know why? He should have started counting 11 years later. 11 years later is when Tzidkiyahu was sent into Golos and when the Beis Hamikdash itself was Chorb. That's when the 70 years should have been counted from. Frankly, but that's not true. Because if you count 70 years from Chorban Bayis, they still weren't Nigla yet. The Gula still didn't come. Soif Kama B'tzirin. How many years is he missing? It would have been Chadesha, or they say Treas, 12 years. He should have waited an additional 12 years. Well, you know what? Achashverosh was still king 12 years later. So how come you don't find that they rebuilt the Beis Hamikdash 12 years later in Achashverosh's time? In fact, it wasn't rebuilt until after Achashverosh died, until Koresh took over, right? Or the Yovish took over. So the question is, if in fact it is 70 years from Chorban Yerushalayim, it's not either accurate because it should have been the Beis Hamikdash should have been rebuilt in Achashverosh's days. Iyu Kama Molech. How many years did Achashverosh rule? Our base are 14 years, and the Rashi brings rise from Sukkah. Nu Oibazoi Bar Beis Ardidei. In his second year in his third year is when he made the party. He made a mistake. So so you could have added. You could have added another 12 years, and then in his 14th year, in his last year, he boiled the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash should have been rebuilt in Achashverosh's time, but it wasn't. Allah Maksiv, why does it say regarding Achashverosh? If you remember, we learned earlier in the pasuk that said that Achashverosh was Mirisha Mitchilos about Soifai, because as soon as he became king, because of Sitna, he wrote a letter against the Jews, which stopped the Beis Hamikdash from being built. So Ba'dain Betelas Avidas Beis Alaka de Yerushalayim. Because of his letter, it caused that the building of the Beis Hamikdash, which had somewhat started before Achashverosh, in the days of the Yovish and Koresh, was put on hold. And in Koresh's days, they started it, but then it was put on hold because Achashverosh came and put it on hold. So,
what does this also have to do with why they didn't rebuild it in the 14th?
we're saying that in Achashverosh's times, it's clear that in Achashverosh's times, the Beis Hamikdash was not rebuilt.
Yeah, so what does that have to do with the first year that he started?
I'm not.
Based on
No, the pasuk means that because of his letter, he was able to completely stop while he was in power any building of the Beis Hamikdash. So clearly, it wasn't there. So Dr. Gemara, why not? The last year there should have been the building of the Beis Hamikdash, whether Achashverosh allowed it or not. Nevu of Yirmiyahu, when they're bunch of trumps Achashverosh. So Amarava, Shana Mekatos Hava. The calculation that we made is not 100% because there are 2 weak points, and 2 of the points that were discussed in our calculation, it turns out that there's some overlap, which is exactly what Chaim Tzvi said originally. How do you know what month it is? How do you know it's not the same year? And it's exactly what the Gemara answers. And Rashi tells us that the 2 weak points are as follows. At the end of the rule, of Nebuchadnezzar, the beginning of the rule of Avil Merodach, that final year was counted twice. The final year of Nebuchadnezzar and the first year of Avil Merodach is counted both as a year, one of the 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar and one of the 23 years of Avil Merodach. So we lost 1 year right there. The second place where we lost a year, Rashi tells us, is the Gemara on the second wide line says that between Daryavish and Koresh there were 5 years. In fact, there were only 4 years. And Rashi brings psukim to indicate that there was another king in the middle there, a muddy, but whatever it is, that 5 years is really only 4 years. So once you lose 2 years, that pushes it just out of the monarchy of Achashverosh into Daryavish, which is when the Beis Hamikdash was actually rebuilt. Tanya. So now we're going to start on Yud Beis Amud Aleph, Chaim Tzvi's favorite daf, on Yud Beis Amud Aleph, and we're just going to bring another brisa that indicates as well that there was some overlap, and we're missing a year in our calculation of 70 years. I'm not sure yet, but Chaim Tzvi keeps telling me I'm so excited for Yud Beis. So I'm hoping Chaim Tzvi will share with us.
Because you didn't learn the good.
Okay, he'll have results. Okay, so Tanya Namihachi. Now we can get started. Tanya Namihachi. Now Rashi tells us that the Gemara here is quoting a brisa in mid-sentence. So Rashi tells us what happened before these words in the Brisa. So let's look at the top Rashi, on the second Rashi at the top of the page. This is what it says in Seidolim. Beibelia, that night, referring to the night that Kotel Belshazzar, was killed, Malcha, the Kotel Belshazzar Malcha, but the Yovish Madah Kabel Malcha. And the Yovish, the king, took over the Malchus. Hooray, Shivim Shana, there's 70 years, Miyom Shemalach Nebuchadnezzar. There's 70 years from the day that Nebuchadnezzar became a king until the time that Daryavish took over. Or Shivim Chosar Achas, Miyom Shekibe Sheyakim, or only 69 years from when Nebuchadnezzar took over Yerushalayim and took over Yakim. Now, here's where our Gemara picks up. V'oid shana achas leBavel lemalosh shivim shana. We need to add one more year in the Malchus of Bavel before the Malchus of Persia took over. Mishashalat al Yisrael. V'amar Daryavesh is that Malchus from still the Malchus, the monarchy of Bavel, Vishlima. So you need the first year of Daryavesh to be mashlim the 70 years since the Churban, since the Galus, since Nebuchadnezzar took over Yerushalayim. The Achra of B'Shana Acheres, and only the year after that was Melech Koresh b'Bavel. That's when Koresh took over, and he was no longer a Bavli monarchy; he was a Persian monarchy. The Nifkadu Pekida b'Miktas. When the Persians took over, that actually released some of the pressure, and the conditions were less severe for Klal Yisrael when Koresh took over, meaning the Persian Empire took over from the Babylonian Empire. Why? Because what did Koresh say when he became king? Mi bachem mikol amoi yihi ala kavim v'yal. Whoever wants should come and build the Beis Hamikdash. So Rashi l'madlam mi brisa zu. We learn from this brisa that kishameis Belshazzar lo'hoyu l'kibush yokim el shivim chosar achas. When Belshazzar died, there was not 70 years, rather only 69 years since Nebuchadnezzar had taken over Yakim. And we counted earlier Shivim Shana. We counted 70 years. There was Memed in Nebuchadnezzar, there was Chav Gimel Tavil Meroidach, and there was Shloisha, two of Belshazzar. All right, so you must say Harishon Mukatoy from the fact that the Brisa says that you need Daryavesh to fill in the last year proves to us that our cheshbon of 70 years must have been off. There must be some overlap in the regimes that we discussed. Okay, so now we'll get back to business. Omarava. After Neil, Tabai Chushbana. Don't think Achashverosh was such a fool, and Belshazzar was a fool. Daniel himself struggled with figuring out when these 70 years were over. In the 70th year of his Malchus, I'm sorry, the first year of his Malchus, I guess you're talking about Daryavesh, I started the huddling and I finally got a cheshbon. I figured out the calculation as to when we're going to build a Beis Hamikdash. Since even Daniel says, I finally got it figured out, the calculations, it must be that he was also struggling with getting it. The difference is after his struggles, he got it right. Belshazzar and Achashverosh, after their struggles, they got it wrong. So we still have a stirim sukkim, like the Gemara quoted on Amud Beis, and we're going to quote again. Ksiv ad malois leBavel. Yirmiyahu said until Bavel has 70 years, and that was the discussion. What does the malois leBavel mean? What does it mean? Malchus Bavel, which was Belshazzar taught. Does it mean Golus Bavel that Achashverosh taught? And then the Chsiv lecharvish Yerushalayim in Rashi. That's in Sefer Daniel. It says lemalis lecharvish Yerushalayim shivim shana. When the Churban of Yerushalayim will be 70 years old. So what does it mean? Is it the Churban of Yerushalayim, or is it? Now we know halacha l'maaseh it was the Churban of Yerushalayim 70 years, right? That's what it works out to be. But the pasuk in Yirmiyahu doesn't say that. It just says leBavel. So what's pshat in the psukim? Amarava lepekida ba'alma. 70 years after. So in fact, Belshazzar was right. You count from the beginning of Malchus Bavel. What happened 70 years after Malchus Bavel? Daryavish took over. The first Daryavish, not before Achashverosh, right? Those 5 years before Achashverosh, which means after Evel Merodach, right? When they took over, it wasn't the Geula, but the pressure was dropped there was a shtickle geula, things got better for us. But Pekida Ba'alma, behind the Chsiv, I'm sorry, it was Koresh who took over. Behind the Chsiv, Koyamar Koresh, Melech Pras, Kol Mamlochei Sa'aretz, Nosan Li Hashem Alakei Shemayim, V'upokar Alai Livnois Loibayis Birushalayim. So you see that it became a little bit better. He started talking about building the Beis Hamikdash. Let's see what Rashi of Pekida Ba'alma. V'Omer, Lefi Melois Lebavel, Shem Mishana, after Malchus Bavel was already in power for 70 years, Efkoi Deschem, I'll remember you. Hashem will make it a little bit better for us. V'kach Hoisa, what occurred? This is exactly what occurred. Shidnifkadu b'shana achas lekarish melech pras. The first year of Karish melech pras, shishnas ayin aleph lekibish liyayakim. That's happened to be the 71st year since Nebuchadnezzar invaded Yerushalayim. Shapashta Bavel al Yisrael, when Bavel spread out all over Israel. 70 years later, the Persians took over and things got slightly better. Okay, beautiful. Dorish Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda. My dechsiv, it says in the pasuk, Koy Amar Hashem leMashiach. Hashem told his Mashiach, leKoresh asher chzakti biyamini, to Koresh, who I held with my right hand, because Koresh was the one who helped rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. Frank the Gemara, v'chi Koresh Mashiach haya? Was Koresh Mashiach? Of course he was a Mashiach. So Rashi Nimshach K'mo Hashem Mishcha. He surely was a Mashiach. So why is the pasuk referring to him as Mashiach? Well, Amalek Kadosh Baruch Hu Mashiach. Hashem was not talking to Koresh. Hashem was talking to the real Mashiach. And he said, Koyvel ani loch, I'm complaining to you and baklub to you on Koresh. I'm upset about Koresh. Koresh didn't deliver the goods that I asked him to. If you remember before we discussed that Koresh said, I'm going to be the king over the whole world. Hashem said to you, I'll give that to you if you rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. But Koresh let him down. How did Koresh let Hashem down? Because Ani Amarti, I said that Koresh should do what? Hu yivne beisi v'yikabetz galu Yosy. I charged him with building the Beis Hamikdash and gathering the Eden together. He didn't do that. Whoever wants to can come do it. So rather than doing it himself, like I charged him to do it, he just allowed Eden to do it. But Rashi, he didn't get involved at all. So he let me down, and that's why I'm upset with Koresh. Okay, back. I'm sorry.
It's very interesting. So did HaKadosh Baruch Hu ever say to a Navi that Koresh is going to do what he wanted him to do? Because
He didn't do it. He didn't do what Hashem wanted him to.
no, and he ended up not doing it. But does the Navi actually say that Koresh is going to do it, even though he didn't ever do it? Like, do we have a false nebuah? That's my question.
Yeah, who yivne beisi? Ani Amarti who yivne beisi. So let's see where the
So how does that happen? I thought HaKadosh Baruch Hu's nebuah trumps everybody's word.
I think he told Koresh, if you do it, yeah, if you do it,
So doesn't say if, he said who he is. He will.
So,
I don't know.
so who called Koresh the Mashiach Hashem? Is
Well,
it the
pasuk,
Navi?
The Navi is saying, Koyamar Hashem, the Mashiach. This is what Hashem told to his Mashiach, Koresh. So the pasuk shot of the pasuk is we're identifying Koresh as the Mashiach that Hashem was talking to. The Gemara
Okay, Mashiach literally means anointed. Was he anointed in any way?
That's the Gemara's kasha. The Gemara's kasha is how could we refer to Koresh as the Mashiach if Koresh was not anointed? That's exactly how Rashi describes the kasha of the Gemara. So the Gemara says Hashem was really talking to Mashiach. Hashem was speaking to the real Mashiach, who was Mashiach Hashem and Yisrael, about Koresh. The pasuk of the pasuk is the Mashiach who was Koresh. We're learning the Mashiach about Koresh.
So who?
I couldn't hear what you said.
So who was that Mashiach?
Who was the real Mashiach that he was talking to? I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. Maybe he was Menachem Mendel.
Okay, not only isn't he dead now, he was alive then. No, but it's a little, still, it's quite cryptic to say he was speaking to Mashiach, but we don't know who that is.
Right. We don't know who that is. And then Chaim Tzvi's kasha is also, if Hashem told him who Yivne Beisi, so how is it possible that it doesn't come out? But again, he told him to do it, but he had to hear it, he didn't. Yeshaya Novi? Yeah. You mean Koya Mashalom Shichai? Ah. Okay, so let's see the Gemara back. Chayil Parasumadai. Let's get into the details of the party. Chayil Parasumadai Hapartanim. Uksiv Lamalche Modai Uparas. So let's think. In the first pasuk, the word Modai is closest to the Partanim. In the second pasuk, the word Modai is closest to the Malche. Partamim are the regional governors. That's how he defines them. The regional governors, and the Melech is the king. So were the people from Modai the kings, or were they merely the governors? Amarava, Asnuya Asna Ba'adadi. They had an agreement, the Paras and Modai people had an agreement that you cannot keep all the power concentrated in one place. We're going to have a separation of powers. Imi non malchi, if the Democrats are going to be the president, then then the Republicans are going to be the governors. But if you're going to be, if the Republicans are going to have the presidency, we're going to have the governors. I'm sorry? Yeah. There's a separation of powers. Achashverosh was displaying, or you can even say flaunting, the covet of his malchus. Achashverosh put on big kahuna. How do we know that they put on big kahuna? Because it says Veshikar Teferes Gedulasa, referring to Achashverosh, Chafasam referring to the big kahuna, L'chavid Ulusafaris. Then the Megilla goes back to Rav Ushmuel, Chadamar Melech Pikeach Haya. One said that Achashverosh was a smart strategist, the way he did this. The Chadamar Melech Tipish Haya. And one says he was a fool. Mandamar Melech Pikeach Haya. The Mandamar who said he was a clever king. Shaper Ovid, the Karib Rechika Beresha. What he did was also Melech L'Chola'am, and then only after he made L'Chola'am did he make a party for the people that were in Shushan Abir. So he says, why was he smart? Because first he decided to be Mekarev, the people who were far away, because he didn't have any way to control them. So he needed to gain favor in their eyes. So first he made a party for them so they'll like him. Someone far away, it's very hard for him to control. He can't go there, he can't be there. He needs them to be loyal to him. So by making the party for them first, he bought their control, even though they paid for it. Right? So therefore, the covered Rechika Bereisha, the Bnei Moshe, because in his close people in Shushan, he has plenty of time later on to win them over. But the people who are far away, who are going to go away, he's got to take care of them first. Mandam are Tipish, and the Mandam was a Tipish, it's the Boiler Bnei Moshe Bereisha. It would have been more clever for him to first get in his own city. Because this way, if the people who are far away want to rebel, they will still back him up. So I heard a very nice shot as to what would make more sense. And it was totally in a machlokes that we had earlier as to how Achashverosh became king. Did he become king because he was the most qualified? Right? We had on Amar Aleph that why did he become king? Because he was the most qualified, or he wasn't qualified, but he forced himself in. So I want to make sure that I say it over properly. If he was the most qualified, right? If he was the most qualified, then again, I hope I'm not saying it over wrong, but I'm going to try to remember what I heard. I'm sorry? But if he was the most qualified, no, that's right. If he was the most qualified, then he was a pikeach. But then what he would have done is, if he was a pikeach, he took the people that were closest to him first. I'm sorry, he took the people that are close to him first. Why? Because he doesn't want them to rebel. But since he was the most qualified, he's recognized as a leader. But if he's hated because he's not recognized as a leader, he just pushed him. He just pushed his way in. So then he would need to buy everyone's votes. He would need to buy popularity. So let me see which one is Tali Zebazet. I don't remember which one is Tali Zebazet, but let's see if we can figure out our own svar. If Hitaka was deserving of it, right? So everybody voted for him. So then who would he want to be Makar first? those who are close to him or those who are far away? I'm not sure. You might argue that who would know that he's very qualified? Not people from far away. They have no idea who the guy is. The guy close to him knows that he's qualified. So therefore, as a Pikeach, he'd reach out to people who are far away to introduce himself to them so that he should be able to win them over. But if he forced himself in, then everybody near him hates him because he would force himself in. So then it would make sense for him to have the close people to him first and then the people far away. Okay, so let's see the Gemara right. Because otherwise, no, I understand, but the problem is to have the Gemara say two svaras, one that is a pech, one that is a shoita, so he's not such a shoita, because the Gemara had a tzad to say that same thing made him into a pikeach. So yeah, that's what you have to say. It depends on what the mitzvah is.
It's like everything in life, nobody's a total fool. A fool can make some smart while and
unless your name is Brandon.
Huh? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. A fool can make smart moves sometimes. Okay. So to Gemara weiter. Shalu Talmidav Reb Shimon ben Yochai. The Talmidim asked Reb Shimon ben Yochai. If the Imam is chayvu shonei shel Yisrael sheboisa dar kliya. So of course this is all referring to Klal Yisrael. Why is it that they were mechuyev kliya? In other words, they were supposed to. There was a gzeir on them that they're all going to be destroyed. Amulem Reb Shimon ben Yochai told them, Imiratem, maybe you say a svar. Amuloi, they told him if they should henu musudasa shel oisha Russia because they enjoyed the suda of Yena Russia. So of course, Aldaval wants to speak about samach chamol. You have to go to an averi. You have to do things. You have to make compromises. But have a noah from it. That was David. David doesn't let that they participated. They had to participate. Otherwise, it'd be a patch in the face to the king. But they had a noah. That was David. Im came. Shebeshushan yahargu. Shebechol adam kulei al yahargu. So Reb Shimon Yochai challenged them. If that's the case, it was all about the Suda, then only the people who were in the hand from the Suda should get killed, not everybody else. So Amalek told them, okay, Rabbi, then and more after. So you say this far. Because they bowed down to the Tzelem back in the days of Nebuchadnezzar. They bowed down to Avodah Zarah. If that's the case, so why Taka weren't they destroyed? They deserve to be punished. They absolutely deserve to be punished. So why would Hashem just wipe it away? Now Rashi says a little differently. Rashi says the chimas upon me eich zochel neis. The male they did tshuva, so they had a kapara. But why were they such a big neis? They could have been saved without such a big neis. So Amalemi told them, they didn't really respect Avodah Zarah. They weren't really beating Avodah Zarah. They were doing it because there was a gun to their head, Meira. So it was fake. And this is what Chaim Tzvi said yesterday. Hashem never intended to destroy the Yidden in the times of Haman. He just did it to shake them up, to scare them. Just like the Yidden deemed Avodah Zarah insincerely, so too HaKadosh Baruch Hu threatened the Yidden insincerely. The person didn't do the Aveira from his heart. In other words, he wasn't sincere. He did the Aveira because he was forced to, and then the Pasuk finishes off Vayagib ben Aish, and therefore we could clear him. That's a mokum to be Malamet Schos on the person. Zok to Gemara Baiter. We are very behind. The Chatzar Ginas Bisan Hamelach. Chatzar is the yard. Gina is the vegetable garden. Bisan is the orchard. So exactly where was this? Rabu Shmuel. Chadamer Haroy Lechatzer. The riffraff only were in the Chatzer. Haroy Legina, the best of the mentioned, were in the Gina, and the Haroy Lebisan, the top elites, were in Lebisan. Chadamer Hashivim the Chatzer. He wanted everybody to be in the Chatzer. He didn't want to have the mess inside his house. They didn't fit. Begin of Achsikasim. Achech Nisan Levesan until he had Lebisan until he brought him into the house. And that Achsikasim, and then the area of the hall was big enough. Hashivim the Chatzer. He put him in the Chatzer. And he opened up the two doors in the Chatzer. Echad Legina v'Echad Lebisan. Next, it says Chur Karpas U'Scheles. My Chur, what was a Chur that was displayed by this party? Rav Amar Chari Chari, and Rashi says that Chari Chari is rows, I believe, of jewels. It was rows of jewels. Chari Chari. No, sorry, My Samachet. It was needlepoint. It was embroidery. My Samachet Malachas Amatzois. There was embroidery, beautiful embroidery on the mattresses, on the covers, on the drapes. It was a white type of very high-end wool. Karpas. Amar Rabbi Yosy Bechnina. It means karim shel pasim. It was pillows of possum, which is also a very high-end wool. Al Galila Chesef Amud Sheish, on these rollers of Kesef and Amud Sheish. Then it says Mitais Zahav v'Chesef. They were beds made of gold and silver. Tanya B'Yudaimer. Now these weren't beds to sleep on; these were beds to eat on. Right? They used to eat on beds in those days. So Zok to Gemara, Rabbi Yudaimer, Haroy L'Kesef. Those people who were from the riffraff only got silver beds. Haroy L'Zov. The best of the gachas they got golden beds. Could you imagine to start creating class warfare within the meal when people are drunk? That's not going to end well. That couldn't have happened. The beds were made out of silver, ragleim shalzov, and the legs of the beds were made of silver. Bahat v'sheish, Amarabashi, avonim shemischotitois al baleim. We're talking about the floors were made out of stones that you couldn't get unless you dug for them and mined for them and searched for them. Very rare, precious jewels. Avnei nezer misnoisasois alad masai, which indicates that the choshev type of stones, you have to really look, and it's comparing Klal Yisrael to these choshev stones that you really have to dig and mine and search and sift to find them. V'dar v'secharis, Rav Omar Dori Dori. This is where I said earlier, it's rows and rows of precious stones. Shmuel Omar Evan Toiva Yesh B'Krach Hayam V'Dora Shema. There's a stone that's in the Krach Hayam that's called Dora. Hashiva B'Emsa Suda. You put it in the middle of the hall. Ume'ir Lahem Katzarayim. It lit them up. So that's what it was. It was a special type of jewel that lit things up. Maybe similar to what the Noach used. Yeah. The very Rabbi Shmuel Tana. Shakara Dror L'Cholbali Schayra. He suspended the GST. He suspended the HST. So all merchants were now able to sell tax-free. That was just for a very brief moment, because we know Achashverosh piled on the taxes. So Rashi says, sales tax, he totally eliminated sales tax to win them over. You know what it is? He's partying with them, and he's reducing taxes temporarily. That sounds like just like a Justin Trudeau thing. And next year they'll double down on taxes, which is what the Gemara told us yesterday, that they hated him because he made them all poor because of his oppressive taxes. Shiny means rare, unusual kalim. So mishunim yibayla. It should say v'chelim mishunim, unusually rare kalim. Amarava yatsa baskel v'amar lahem rishonim kalim v'fnei kalim. You idiot, Achashverosh. Belshazzar got destroyed because he defiled the kalim. But atem shonim b'hem, and you once again are repeating that same avera. You're going to be in trouble. V'yein malchus Rav Amar v'yein malchus Rav, right? V'yein malchus Rav ki had a melech. Amar Rav malamet shkol echad v'echad hishkeu yain shegot l'yimen b'shanim. The wine that you drank was aged more than your own age. So if you were 30, the wine would have been at least 31 years old. What does it mean, kados? Kados shal Torah. The shtia was like the way the Torah drinks. What does that mean? The karbanis are a higher mass than the nesachim. So there's more eating than drinking. What does it mean? Everybody got from the wine that he was used to, that he liked, the wine from his country. Because Mordechai and Haman were serving. They were in charge. They were the party planners. They were in charge of this great party. Could you imagine? Mordechai dechsiv ish Yehudi, Haman says ish tzar v'oyev. So ish v'ish, you're going to do. He made a party to do k'chan ish v'ish, meaning the party was under the control of Haman, who was an ish, and if Mordechai was an ish, the ish, the Haman was, but they were both considered ish, and that they controlled the party. And we're going to soon see that they had different ways of doing things, right? Mordechai wanted to be all kosher food, and in fact, Mordechai made sure that all the food should be kosher. Haman, the Medrash brings down, wanted to be mekalkel Klal Yisrael and put in tray from the food. But Mordechai was so makbid, he was in charge of the hechsher, he made sure that all the food came in kosher. The problem is, it was the ambayat that caused the problem. A Vermi handler once told me that he went to J2 pizza store. He said the milchiks there was mamish glad kosher, if you could say that on milchiks. The falaisiks there was chazatray. The people. Right? So the ambiance. So that's what happened. Although the food was perfectly kosher, the ambiance, the mingling, that was where the problem was over there.
The problem is that Mordechai at Tzaddik, then you're going to go there and you're going to make that mistake.
I hear. Gam Vashti Amalka also Mishtei Noshim. She also made a Mishtei Noshim Beis Amalkus. Wouldn't Beis Amalkus Beis Anoshim? In other places in the Megillah, it talks about Beis Anoshim. Kila, the women were kept segregated. So Vosepis, her party was Beis Amalkus. The territory, she also wanted mingling. She was also a prutza. Not only was Achashverosh a boor, she was a bura as well. They both indulge. They have different ways of indulging. She's interested in stuff that interests her, that are pornographic, and he's interested in things that interest him. But they're both from the same type of novolim. It took 7 days. What do you don't think Achashverosh drank on the first day? It was this day, the day that Vashti got killed, that Vashti was taken down, was Shabbos. That's the day where Klai shall eat and drink. And how do we eat and drink? We start with Divrei Torah and Divrei Tishbachas, like Dave Zolti mentioned before. And there are those who learn from here that you're supposed to first say Divrei Torah about a Shabbos Suda and then sing Zmiris, because it's Divrei Torah first and then Divrei Tishbachas. Aval, what do? They fresh and they zov. What do they talk about by their sudas? In Yonei Znus, in Yonei Pritzes. And that's exactly what happened by this Achashverosh. What were they discussing? Women. These people were saying Madios noise. The Majiro, the English of Faber, they're prettier. Madios. Mother really means for Madai, but I'm touching it Majiro. The Majiro might look, right? The Polishes didn't invest it. So Amar Achashverosh, Kalish Ani Mishtamish Boy. My wife, look how he says Kalish Ani Mishtamish Boy. How degrading he was. Einoi loy Madioi. She's not a Majiro. V'loy Parshi. She's a Polish. What is she? She's a Kasti. She's from the Kastim because she was Belshazzar's daughter. You want to see the schod of a sicha do? Amar in. But no makeup, no clothing. You can make anything look nice with makeup and clothing. We want to see it in the raw. Why was Vashti defiled that she had to come out? Because she did this to the Jewish girls on Shabbos, and that's why it was negay on Shabbos. She would make the Jewish girls work for her in the nude on Shabbos, a disgusting defilation of Bnei Yisrael. So because of that, her downfall came on Shabbos in the same manner where she was undressed.
So how was the Gemara?
The Gemara's question was B'yom Shvi. It was Shabbos.
No, the Gemara answered that Otu Ad Hashta.
He didn't. Yes, he was drunk all week. But the reason why I said B'yom Shvi is because the emphasis is on the Yom Shvi that happened on Shabbos. So he was drunk all week, but on Shabbos he was also drunk. On Shabbos, when Achashverosh was still drunk, this occurred.
So he was also drunk on Shabbos, but he was drunk before.
In Yechanami.
So then what's the answer?
No, because the Pasuk shot in the Pasuk is and it took 7 days till he got drunk. Now the church says no, but Yom Shvi is not saying because it took him 7 days to get drunk. It was Yom Shvi was a day of Shabbos where he happened to be drinking.
So it didn't have to say
no, but it needed to know that Achashverosh was drunk as well, because this wouldn't have happened if Achashverosh wasn't drunk. That's also negated to the Gemara. It's also negated to the Gemara that he had to have been drunk. So let's see what the Gemara says. The Chsiv Achar Dvar Ma'ela Kisoy Chametz Hamelach Achashverosh Zochar is Vashti V'Asher Asosa V'Asher Nigzer Aleh. Zok the Gemara. So what does it mean? Asher Asosa V'Asher Nigzer Aleh. So Pashim Shad is she didn't want to dance and didn't want to come in preachers according to Achashverosh, and then Achashverosh was going to know that she got killed. But we're dashing no. Asher Asosa Kishem She'Asosa. The same avil that she did to the Bnei Yisrael, Kach Nigzer Aleh, that was Nigzer Aleh. But Tamoy Namal Vashti. Why would she mind? She would want to show off her body. She'd love to come out there. Did we not say that she was the same prutza? My time she should have pranced right out. She had a terrible outbreak of taras. Now already it's not so good anymore. And she wasn't allowed to use any makeup. So now she's in trouble. That's why she didn't want to come. The Gavriel was spinning tails. And he spun a tail on Vashti. She said, no, it's not such a crazy thing that his wife shouldn't want to come out and dance naked in front of this party. What happened? He went freaked out. You know why? Because she didn't just say no. She said no with a knife in his chest. She was Navazim Barabim. Omar Arova, Sholchale, Bar Haruri the Abba. You know what you are? You used to run the stables of my father. You low life, good for nothing slave. Abba Lakabal Alpha Chamri Shasi. My father could drink with 1,000 men, and he could drink more than the Pashup is more than 1,000 men. But the unfortunate way, he could drink more than 1,000 men. He can drink more than anybody else in the room. But like Robin, he wouldn't get drunk. He would still keep his wits about him. Who Gavra, and you low life Achashverish Ishtati Bechamra, you drank a little bit, and you're already tight chick for doing crazy things. So Yeshuam Mashma Basim Barabim. So therefore, Bachamosa Ba'arava, he freaked out. Yomer Melech LaChachamim. Who were the Chachamim that the Melech first engaged? Mancham Rabbanon. Yoida Itim, why were they called Yoida Itim? Sheyoidin La'aver Shanim V'Lekvoya Chadoshim. They knew how to make months and days. Amalu Dainuali. I want the Jewish Bezdin, the wise people from the Jewish Bezdin, to pass them for me. This is a lose-lose proposition. And that's why it was important that he was drunk. Amru, Hechedavid. If we suggest that he kill her, Lamacher pasuk lechamri. Tomorrow he won't be drunk. That's why we needed to know was toiv leil melech b'yayin. And what's going to happen? Uvalan minon. He's going to ask her back. Where's my wife that you condemned to death? And he'll blame it for us. Nemele shavka. If we say leave her, don't kill her. He's drunk now. He's in a fury. Come azalza b'malchusa, and he'll kill us. So what do they tell? They had to get out of it. Amalek told them Yom Shachar Beis Hamikdash. V'galinu me'artzenu. Ever since we were in Golos, nitla eitzamimenu. We no longer were unsettled, so we could no longer paskin, especially on such important matter. We can no longer paskin din nefashos. You know, you should ask. Let's get them in trouble. They're the best people to ask. You know why? The Yasib b'dachtayu. They're sitting settled in their place. Kechamer the Yosef al der daya, like a barrel of wine where the wine is sitting on its shmurim, unshoken. Everything's settled. Everything's calm. When everything's calm and settled, they could paskin for you perfectly. Let them do it. The time Amrulay, and they even gave him a svar with a pasuk. Sha'anan Moyav Minuurav. Moyav was settled from its youth. Vishoiketu al Shmorav, and he's resting on the Shmorim. V'layhurak Mekli al Kli. It wasn't stirred over. Uvagoy Halach, and they didn't go into Golos. Al Kain Omat Haimoy Boy. Therefore, its taste remains strong in the wine. V'reichei Loy Nomer. And there are those who say that even the Goyish Besin, who wanted the power to paskin, they quoted this pasuk to the king. So Miyad, Achashverosh says, what a great idea. Ba'karvel of Karshina, Seiser, Admasa, Tarshish. Omar Belevi, call pasuk zeh al shum karbanis nemar. Right now, there was a major din in Shemayim. Should HaKadosh Baruch Hu kill Vashti for torturing Klal Yisrael all the years or not? So the Malachim were masker karbanis to be masker schus of Klal Yisrael to get Vashti condemned. Karshina, Omar Malach HaShosh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Rebbeinu Shalom. Klum ekrivel lefanecha karim b'nei shana kedech shekrivel Yisrael lefanecha. Did Goyim bring karbonis for you? No. So avada, you have to rule in favor of the Eden. Shesar klum hekrivel lefanecha shtei tayrin. Did anyone bring the 2 oxen as karbonis like Klal Yisrael did? Admasa klum banu lefanecha mizbeach adama Tarshish klum shimshu lefanecha bevigdei kahuna dichsibu Tarshish b'shoyam b'yoshvei meres. Klum mirsu b'dam lefanecha. Did they ever stir blood in front of you so it shouldn't harden like they did on Yom Kippur? Marsana. Klum mirsu b'menachas lefanecha. Did they mix the menachas in front of you? Memuchan. Klum heichinu shulchan lefanecha. Did they ever create a shulchan in front of you? So the malachim were masker all of the schusim that Klal Yisrael has and the karbonis that they brought to the Beis Hamikdash that the Goyim destroyed. The Klal Yisrael of all these schusim condemned Vashti. The Yom Memuchan. So Memuchan pipes up. Tani we learned. Memuchan's a Haman. Why was it called Memuchan? Shemuchan leperonis. He was being set up for a major downfall. Omar of Kana, Mikan, you see from here, Shahedid Kovetz Barosh. Usually the simplest guy jumps in to stick his opinion in first when he really should be quiet until the greatest in him speak. Everybody should rule over his house. Omar Rava says, if it wasn't for this set of letters that was set out in Achashverosh's name, which were so foolish that made Achashverosh look like an idiot, and because of that, people didn't really listen to his xeris anymore. As soon as Achashverosh sent out the second letters of Haman to kill Klal Yisrael, they wouldn't have waited to the designated date of Yud Daled Adar. They would have killed the Jews instantly. But now they weren't so sure that Achashverosh was sane, so they wanted to wait to see what would happen. My hide is Shadurlon. What type of stupid xer is that? Pshita, afilu karcha bevese, Even every simpleton in his own house, he's a prince. So the fact that Achashverosh has to make the Gzeira, clearly the guy's like a Biden. So we don't want to listen to him. We don't even know how long he's going to be in power.
Not today.
Okay.
Today, everybody has
Yeah.
equal partnership.
So I have to stop, even though I didn't finish the daf, so we'll have to be mamshech tomorrow. So we'll stop here. B'ezras Hashem. Okay, so what was the Vilna Gaon?
Rav Mansour told me in 2016,
Right?
right, that the Gemara's answer doesn't answer his kasha. Because it doesn't. The kasha was Ketoy Leva Melech B'Yayim, right?
Right.
So the answer is Kishi Yisrael, Oindim, and Shoisim, right? How's the Gemara answer? Take a look. Right? Omar Rabbi Yovesh Shabbos Fire, she Yisrael, Oisim, Shoisim, Askim, Jibrei Tov, Shigol. What does that have to do with the Gemara? What does that have to do with the kasha of the Gemara? The Gemara asked.
I thought because the Gemara is trying to show that this whole thing occurred on Shabbos.
So what's that to do with the name Yisrael?
Oh, so why does it bring that in? Oh, here. Why does it bring that source? Oh, I hear. So what's in Nageya that Shabbos is a day where Klal Yisrael sings Zmiris? That's not Nageya. It should have gone straight to the chase. It was Shabbos because that's when Vashi tortured us.
Right. So the Goyen looks at this Gemara, right, and he says, this is one of the main, if not the main raya, that when the Melech is mentioned in the Megilla, the Melech is HaKadosh Baruch. So when it says, Ketoy Leva Melech B'Yayim, the Goyen says, it doesn't mean Achashverosh Ketoy Leva Melech B'Yayim. It means when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right, is happy. Ketoy Leva Melech, what B'Yayim? HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't get drunk. Ketoy Leva Melech, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is happy with the wine that the Bnei Yisrael are drinking.
And now I know why Chayes loves this word so much.
Yeah, so when the Bnei Yisrael are eating and drinking, what happens when they get drunk? They speak in Hallel and Divrei Shizbachos, right? And Divrei Torah. And when the Goyim get drunk, that's what they do. They speak about this and all kinds of narrative.
I hear.
Right?
I hear.
And actually, the Python does the same thing, right?
Oh, that's why you said it should be on Shabbos. It would be appropriate on Shabbos.
Right.
Gewaltig. Right, shkoyach.